Daiho had been working in space for 3 years, and he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. The salvage ship floated near the debris field, its old engines humming quietly. Daiho checked his suit one more time before stepping out into the void. His job was simple: find valuable metal scraps from the ancient battle site and bring them back. It was boring work, but it paid well enough. "Be careful out there," Captain Hyon said through the radio. "Some of those wrecks are unstable." "Always am," Daiho replied, pushing himself toward a large piece of twisted metal. The debris field was massive, spreading across several kilometers of space. Most of it was worthless junk, but sometimes Daiho found intact power cores or rare alloys. Those were the prizes that made this job worthwhile. He moved from wreck to wreck, his magnetic tether keeping him connected to the salvage ship. He spotted something unusual, a section of hull that looked different from the others. It was sleek and dark, not corroded like the rest. Daiho activated his scanner, but it gave strange readings. The metal seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it was not quite solid. "Captain, I found something weird," he said. "Define weird," Hyon responded. "I don't know. The scanner can't identify it. Should I check it out?" There was a pause. "Your call. Just don't take risks." Daiho moved closer. The metal was beautiful, like nothing he had seen before. He reached out to touch it, and that was when everything went wrong. The surface rippled like water, and suddenly his tether went tight. The magnetic lock activated at full power, pulling him forward violently. "What the—" Daiho tried to disconnect, but the controls were not responding. The strange metal opened like a mouth, and he was dragged inside. Light exploded around him, colors that hurt his eyes. He felt like he was being stretched and compressed at the same time. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Daiho crashed onto a hard floor. His helmet display was flashing error messages, but he could breathe. The air was thin but breathable. He looked around, trying to understand where he was. The room was enormous and beautiful. The walls glowed with soft purple light, and strange symbols floated in the air like holograms. In the center of the room, someone was standing on a raised platform. She turned to look at him, and Daiho forgot how to breathe. She was tall, taller than any human, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer. Her eyes were large and entirely black, like pools of deep water. She wore flowing robes that moved without wind, and her hair floated around her head like she was underwater. She was clearly not human, but she was the most beautiful thing Daiho had ever seen. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The alien woman stared at him with an expression of complete shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Around her, the floating symbols began to flicker and change color, going from soft blue to angry red. Daiho said intelligently. "Sorry, wrong room." The woman's shock deepened. She looked at him like he had just spoken in a dead language. Then suddenly, doors burst open on all sides of the room. Soldiers poured in, wearing armor that looked like it was made from liquid metal. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, all pointed at Dai-Ho. He slowly raised his hands. Okay. I come in peace and all that." One of the soldiers shouted something in a language Daiho did not understand. The woman on the platform raised one hand, and instantly every soldier froze. She spoke, her voice musical and strange. The soldiers lowered their weapons, but kept them ready. She stepped down from the platform and approached Daiho. Up close, she was even more impressive. She had to be at least 7 feet tall. She circled him slowly, studying him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. "Do you speak English?" Daiho asked. "Or any human language." She stopped in front of him and touched a device on her wrist. There was a soft beep, and when she spoke again, He could understand her. "You are human," she said. It was not a question. "Yeah, name's Deho. I'm a salvage worker. I was just collecting scrap metal when something pulled me through. Whatever that was. A spatial fold," she said quietly. "We were studying it. It should have been sealed. Well, it wasn't. Look, I'm really sorry for barging in. If you could just point me toward the exit, I'll get out of your hair. Or, whatever you call that." He gestured at her floating hair. She did not smile. Instead, her expression became even more serious. "You do not understand what you have done. I crashed into your room. I get it. It's rude. Again, really sorry. This is not just a room," she said. "This is the sanctum. I am Princess Isla of the Veltharian Empire, and I was in the middle of the rite of ascension. No outsider has ever entered during this rite. Not in 3,000 years. Deho felt his stomach drop. "Oh, that's bad, isn't it?" "According to our oldest laws," Princess Isla said slowly, "the one who enters the sanctum uninvited during the rite becomes bonded to the royal bloodline. It cannot be undone. Bonded? What does that mean?" "It means," she said, and for the first time he heard emotion in her voice, "that your fate is now tied to mine. By law, by blood, by forces older than either of our species. You cannot be separated from me by more than a star system's distance without both of us experiencing severe pain. You cannot be executed without my permission. You cannot leave without my approval." Deho stared at her. "You're joking." "I do not joke about matters of law." One of the soldiers spoke urgently to the princess in their language. She responded sharply, then turned back to Deho. "Commander Vel wants me to execute you immediately. It would be the simplest solution. The bonding would end with your death." "I'm not a huge fan of that plan," Deho said. "Neither am I," Princess Isla admitted. "Killing you would cause an incident with your species. Earth is small, but you have allies. More importantly, if the Imperial Council discovers what happened here, my claim to the throne will be challenged. My enemies will use this against me. So what do we do?" She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "We find a way to undo the bonding before anyone discovers what happened. Until then, you will remain on this ship as my guest." "Guest, right. The kind of guest who can't leave." "Precisely." She turned to her soldiers and gave orders. Two of them approached Deho. "They will take you to quarters. Do not attempt to escape. Do not speak to anyone about what happened here. And for the sake of both our futures, do not touch anything." As the soldiers led him away, Deho looked back at Princess Isla. She stood in the center of her sanctum, surrounded by flickering red symbols, looking more alone than anyone he had ever seen. He had a feeling that his boring life as a salvage worker was officially over. Captain Hyan was probably wondering where he went. Deho hoped his insurance covered accidentally bonded to alien royalty. The quarters they gave Deho were nicer than his entire apartment back on Earth. The room was large, with walls that changed color based on his mood, though he was not sure how they knew what he was feeling. There was a bed that floated slightly off the ground, a bathroom with fixtures he was afraid to use, and a window that showed the stars outside. He had been stuck in this room for 2 days. Guards stood outside his door at all times. Food appeared through a slot in the wall 3 times a day, and while it looked strange, it tasted fine. Nobody came to talk to him except for a medical officer who scanned him with devices that made his teeth hurt. On the 3rd day, the door opened and Commander Vel entered. The Veltharian soldier was almost as tall as Princess Isla, with darker blue skin and scars across his face. He looked at Deho like he was examining a particularly ugly insect. "Come with me," Vel said in accented English. Where are we going? The princess wants to see you. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Other Veltharians stared at Dai-Ho as they passed. Some looked curious, others looked disgusted. One actually hissed at him. Vel put his hand on his weapon, and the hissing Veltharian backed away. They don't like humans much, do they? Dai-Ho asked. They don't know humans, Vel replied. You are the first one most of them have seen. They think you are primitive, weak. Thanks for the confidence boost. I think you are a spy, Vel said bluntly. I think you planned this. I think you are here to undermine the princess. With respect, that's the dumbest plan I've ever heard. Why would Earth send one random salvage worker to mess with your princess? Vel said nothing, but his hand stayed near his weapon. They reached a large door that opened into a conference room. Princess Ayla sat at a long table, surrounded by strange devices and holographic displays. She looked tired. When she saw Dai-Ho, she gestured for him to sit. How are your quarters? She asked. Comfortable. A bit lonely. Good. We need to discuss the situation. She waved her hand, and the holograms changed to show diagrams of something biological. I have been researching the bonding. It is more complex than I thought. Our neural patterns are beginning to synchronize. What does that mean in simple terms? It means we are starting to share thoughts and feelings. Not completely, but fragments. I can sense when you are anxious. You can probably sense when I am angry. Dai-Ho thought about it. He had been feeling inexplicably worried for the past 2 days, even though he was relatively safe. So you've been stressed, very much so. She looked at Vel. Leave us. The commander clearly did not want to, but he obeyed. When the door closed, Ayla's professional mask slipped slightly. There is something else. The bonding is not just mystical. High Priestess Nara examined the ancient texts. According to them, the bonding happens because the sanctum itself chooses who to bond with the royal family. It only bonds those who can survive. Survive what? Being near us, Ayla said quietly. Veltharians are different from humans in many ways. We are stronger, faster. Our body temperature is much lower. Our atmosphere has compounds that are toxic to most species. The sanctum only bonds those who can physically withstand proximity to royalty for extended periods. But I'm human. We're not that tough compared to other species. That is what I thought too. Before she could explain further, alarms blared throughout the ship. Ayla jumped to her feet, listening to rapid reports through her communicator. Her face went pale. Plasma conduit rupture in the engine room. 3 crew members trapped. She ran, and Dai-Ho ran after her. Guards tried to stop him, but Ayla shouted something, and they let him pass. They reached the engine room to find chaos. Smoke filled the air, and a massive pipe was spewing superheated plasma. 3 Veltharians were trapped behind it, unable to reach the exit. Containment team is 3 minutes away, an officer reported. They will be dead by then. Dai-Ho assessed the situation. There was a manual shutoff valve on the other side of the plasma leak. Someone would have to go through the heat to reach it. I'll do it, he said. Everyone stared at him. You will die, Ayla said flatly. Maybe. Got a better idea? He did not wait for an answer. He grabbed a piece of metal plating to use as a shield and ran toward the plasma stream. The heat hit him like a physical wall. His exposed skin immediately began to burn, and he could smell his hair singeing. But he pushed forward, keeping the metal between him and the worst of it. The Veltharians shouted in shock as he reached the valve. His hands were blistering, but he gripped the wheel and turned with all his strength. The valve was stuck from heat expansion. Dai-Ho roared and threw his whole body weight into it. The valve turned. The plasma flow cut off. Dai-Ho collapsed. The medical team rushed to him immediately, but he was conscious. His skin was red and burned, but he was alive. The 3 trapped crew members stared at him in disbelief. Isla knelt beside him. That heat should have killed you instantly. Humans are pretty heat resistant, Beho gasped. We evolved in hot climates. Not that hot, but we're stubborn. The medical officer scanned him rapidly. 2nd degree burns over 30% of his body. But he is already healing. His cellular regeneration rate is ... impossible. Over the next week, Beho's burns healed completely. The Veltharian crew started looking at him differently. When artificial gravity failed in one sector, he moved through zero gravity like he was born to it, rescuing 2 crew members who were panicking. When a cargo container nearly crushed a worker, Daiho somehow held it long enough for others to pull the worker free. High Priestess Nara came to visit him. She was ancient, her skin almost white with age, her eyes cloudy. But when she looked at Daiho, she seemed to see something others did not. The texts speak of the enduring ones, she said, beings who survived what others could not. We thought it was metaphor. But you are real. I'm just a guy who got lucky, Daiho protested. Luck? Nara smiled. Your species survived ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed your world. You adapted to every environment on your planet. You did not become the strongest or the fastest. You became the ones who would not stop. Another human ship arrived a week later. Ambassador Jin Woo came aboard to negotiate Daiho's release. He was a friend from Earth, and his jaw dropped when he saw where Daiho was being kept. What did you do? Jin Woo demanded. It's complicated. Jin Woo met with Princess Isla. He explained human history, trying to convince her that Earth was worth treating as an equal. She listened carefully, asking questions about human wars, human survival, human stubborn refusal to give up even when logic said they should. That night, an explosion rocked the ship. Assassins from a rival faction attacked Princess Isla's quarters. Daiho was there when it happened, discussing history with her. The attackers burst through the door with energy weapons raised. Daiho did not think. He threw himself in front of Isla. The blast hit him square in the chest, and everything went white. When he woke up 3 days later in medical, Isla was sitting beside his bed. You should be dead, she said softly. Yeah, I get that a lot lately. You saved my life. You would have done the same. She looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps the sanctum knew what it was doing after all. Outside the medical bay window, Daiho could see stars. Somewhere out there was Earth and his old life. But as he looked at Princess Isla, he realized that life was gone. He was part of something bigger now, something he did not fully understand. And strangely, he was okay with that. So, he said, what happens next? Isla smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. Now we face the Imperial Council. The throne world of Velthara was beautiful and terrifying. As their ship approached, Daiho stared out the window at floating cities connected by bridges of light. The planet itself glowed blue and purple, its 3 moons hanging in the sky like jewels. Impressive, right? Jin Woo said beside him. The ambassador had decided to accompany them, along with the security detail led by a stern human soldier named Tae Min. It's incredible, Daiho admitted. I've never seen anything like it. Try not to embarrass our entire species, Jin Woo said with a grin. No pressure. Princess Isla entered the observation deck, now wearing formal armor that looked like it was carved from starlight. The council has been assembled. My father, Emperor Thane, will preside. You will stand trial. Trial for what? I didn't do anything wrong. You exist, she said bluntly. And you are bonded to me. That is enough for my enemies. They landed at the Imperial Palace, which was less a building and more a mountain carved into impossible architecture. Guards in ceremonial armor lined their path. Thousands of Veltharians watched from balconies and windows, all staring at the human who had disrupted their princess's life. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling seemed to reach into infinity, and the walls were covered with moving murals showing Veltharian history. At the far end, on a throne that floated above the floor, sat Emperor Thane. He looked like an older, harder version of his daughter, with silver skin and eyes that had seen centuries of rule. Beside the throne stood Prince Kael, Isla's cousin. He was handsome in a sharp, cruel way, and when he looked at Dai-Ho, his smile was like a knife. "Princess Isla," Emperor Thane's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have bonded with a human. Explain yourself." Isla stepped forward, her head held high. The bonding was accidental, but legitimate. It occurred during the rite of ascension. By ancient law, it cannot be undone. "Convenient," Prince Kael said smoothly. "How do we know this was not planned? Perhaps the princess seeks to weaken our bloodline by mixing it with inferior genetics." Murmurs ran through the assembled council. Dai-Ho felt anger flash through him, but before he could speak, Ambassador Yuna's voice rang out. She had just entered, leading a delegation of humans in formal diplomatic attire. "Inferior?" Yuna said coldly. "Bold words from a species that nearly destroyed itself in civil war 3 centuries ago. Shall we discuss who is inferior, Prince Kael?" Emperor Thane raised a hand for silence. "Ambassador Yuna, your presence was not requested. And yet, here I am. Where one human goes, Earth follows. We take care of our own." The Emperor studied her, then turned back to Isla. "The Council has decided. The human will undergo the 3 trials. If he passes, the bonding will be accepted. If he fails, it will be dissolved, and he will be returned to Earth." "Dissolved how?" Isla asked. Emperor Thane did not answer, which was answer enough. The first trial was held in a chamber filled with complex machinery. A puzzle had been created that had stumped Veltharian scholars for generations. A quantum lock that required solving 17-dimensional mathematics while the variables constantly changed. Dai-Ho stared at the floating symbols and equations. "I don't even understand the question." The Veltharian examiner smiled smugly. "Then you fail." But Dai-Ho kept looking. He tilted his head, approaching the puzzle from different angles. The Veltharians had been trying to solve it through pure calculation. But what if it was not about solving it perfectly? What if it was about finding a pattern in the chaos? He reached out and started moving symbols randomly. The examiner started to object, but Jing-Wu held up a hand. "Let him work." Dai-Ho moved pieces based on instinct, not logic. He was not trying to solve the puzzle. He was trying to see the shape of it. And suddenly, he saw it. The solution was not in the mathematics, but in the spaces between. He moved one final piece, and the entire puzzle collapsed into a simple, elegant form. The room went silent. "Impossible," the examiner whispered. The second trial was combat. Dai-Ho faced a Veltharian champion named Theron, who had never lost a fight. The arena was large and circular, with weapons of various types mounted on the walls. Theron was fast and strong, moving like liquid metal. He grabbed a blade that hummed with energy and attacked. Dai-Ho barely dodged, rolling away and grabbing a staff. For the first hour, Dai-Ho just survived. Theron landed hits that would have killed most beings, but Dai-Ho kept getting up. For the second hour, Theron started to slow. He was not used to fights that lasted this long. By the third hour, Theron was breathing hard. Dai-Ho was bloody and battered, but still standing. The Veltharian champion had never fought someone who simply would not quit. "Yield," Theron gasped finally. "I cannot. I have never fought someone like you." Dai-Ho fell to his knees, exhausted. But he had won. The final trial was different. Emperor Thane himself presented it. You stand in a burning building. Inside are two people, Princess Isla and a child you have never met. You can only save one. Who do you choose? Dai-Ho did not hesitate. The child. Gasps filled the council chamber. Prince Kael laughed. He just admitted he values a stranger over the princess. But Emperor Thane held up his hand. Why? Because Isla would never forgive me if I let a child die to save her, Dai-Ho said quietly. And I would never forgive myself. The right choice is not always the easy one. Isla stepped forward, tears in her eyes. He speaks truth. That is the answer of someone worthy. Emperor Thane studied Dai-Ho for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. The bonding is accepted. Princess Isla's claim to the throne remains intact. Prince Kael's face twisted with fury, but he bowed stiffly and left Dot as they walked out of the throne room. Isla took Dai-Ho's hand. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For being exactly who you are. Ambassador Yuna fell into step beside them. Well done, both of you. Now, shall we discuss trade agreements? I think Earth and Velthera have much to offer each other. Dai-Ho looked at the stars through the palace windows. His life had become strange and impossible. But standing here, with Isla beside him and his world opening to the galaxy, he realized he would not change a thing. The hardest part, he thought, was still ahead. 6 months passed, and Dai-Ho still could not get used to being called royal consort. He had attended more ceremonies and meetings than in his entire previous life. He had learned to speak basic Veltharian, though his accent made Isla laugh. He had even started to understand the complex politics of the imperial court, though he still preferred his old, salvage ship. But life had a way of interrupting comfort. The attacks started on the outer colonies. A species called the Hive descended on border worlds, consuming everything in their path. The Hive was not like other species. It operated as one massive consciousness, millions of drones controlled by a central intelligence. Every tactic the Veltharians used, the Hive adapted to within hours. Dai-Ho stood in the war room with Isla, now second in command of military operations. Emperor Thane's health had declined, forcing Isla to take more responsibility. Around them, holographic displays showed colonies going dark one by one. General Oren, the supreme military commander, looked exhausted. We have run 10,000 simulations. Every one ends in defeat. The Hive has studied us for too long. It knows every strategy we might use. Then we need strategies it has not seen, Isla said. We have tried everything. Dai-Ho had been quiet, but now he spoke up. No, you have not. Everyone turned to look at him. He still felt uncomfortable speaking in these meetings, but he had learned that sometimes his perspective mattered. The Hive adapts to optimal strategies, he said slowly. It predicts what a logical opponent will do. But what if we stop being logical? Explain, General Oren demanded. The Hive has fought Veltharians for centuries. It knows you, but it has never fought humans. We do not always do the smart thing. We make mistakes. We act on gut feelings. We do stupid things that somehow work. The Hive cannot predict chaos, because it has never encountered true chaos. Isla's eyes widened. You want to introduce human unpredictability into our military doctrine, not replace it. Add to it. Let human advisors work with your commanders. Not to lead, but to suggest alternatives that make no sense on paper. General Oren looked skeptical, but Isla was already considering. It might work. The Hive's greatest weakness could be its inability to understand irrationality. Within days, human military advisors arrived from Earth. Admiral Ji-Sung led them, a grizzled veteran who had fought in Earth's last major war. He walked into the war room and immediately started asking questions that made the Valfarian officers uncomfortable. "Why do you always protect your supply lines so heavily?" he asked. "Because without supplies, we cannot fight," a Valfarian commander answered, as if it were obvious. "Right. So the Hive knows you will always defend your supply lines." "What if you did not?" "That would be suicide." "Would it, though? What if you let the Hive think it cut off your supplies, then hit it from an unexpected direction? You sacrifice some resources to gain a strategic advantage." The Valfarian officers looked horrified at the waste. But Isla was nodding slowly. "The Hive would not expect us to abandon our doctrine so completely." Dr. Hannah arrived too, a human scientist who wanted to study the bond between Daho and Isla. She ran tests that revealed something remarkable. The bond was enhancing both of them. Isla's rigid tactical thinking was becoming more flexible and creative, while Daho was developing an intuitive sense for Valfarian social dynamics. "You are learning from each other on a neurological level," Dr. Hannah explained. "The bond is not just mystical. It is creating new neural pathways in both your brains." More humans arrived on Valfarian ships. Engineers like Subin, who became Daho's close friend. She was brilliant and funny, and she taught Valfarian technicians new ways to approach old problems. At first, the cultural clash was difficult. Humans were loud and informal. Valfarians were quiet and ritualistic. But slowly, both sides began to see value in their differences. Subin and Daho sat in the observation deck one night, drinking something that was almost, but not quite, like coffee. "This is insane," Subin said. "6 months ago, I was fixing satellites around Mars. Now I am teaching aliens how to improvise repairs." "Tell me about it," Daho agreed. "I was collecting space junk. Do you miss it? The simple life?" He thought about it. "Sometimes. But I think this matters more. We are building something here. Humans and Valfarians working together. That is bigger than salvage work. Look at you, getting philosophical. The princess has been a good influence." He smiled. "Yeah, she has." The joint fleet assembled near a spatial bottleneck called the Threshold. It was the last line of defense before the Hive reached the core Valfarian worlds. If they lost here, billions would die. Ho stood on the bridge with Isla as ships from both species formed up. Valfarian warships were elegant and precise, their formations perfect. Human ships were rougher, more practical, but they bristled with weapons. "Are you afraid?" Isla asked quietly. "Terrified," Daho admitted, "but also ready. We can do this." She took his hand. Through the bond, he felt her confidence, her determination, and beneath it, her fear. She felt his too, and somehow that made both of them stronger. General Oren opened a channel to all ships. "Fleet, prepare for engagement. Remember the new protocols. Human ships, you are authorized to deviate from standard tactics as you see fit. Valfarian ships, be ready to adapt." The Hive arrived like a swarm of locusts. Millions of small ships, all moving in perfect coordination. They formed patterns that would have been beautiful if they were not so terrifying. The battle began, and immediately the joint fleet was in trouble. The Hive had anticipated their formations, their tactics. It flowed around their defenses like water, striking at weak points with surgical precision. "They knew we would change tactics," a commander reported. "They adapted before we even engaged." Daho watched the display, his mind racing. The Hive had adapted to their change in tactics. But what if the change itself changed constantly? What if there was no pattern to adapt to? "Isla," he said urgently, "we need to abandon all coordination." "What?" "Give every ship captain complete freedom. No master plan. No formations. Just tell them to fight however they think is best. Make it so random that even we do not know what we are doing. She stared at him. That goes against every principle of military command. I know. But the hive cannot adapt to something that is not just unpredictable, but actively incoherent. Isla looked at General Oren. The old soldier was skeptical, but he trusted her judgment. Your orders, Princess? She took a deep breath. All ships. Abandon formation. Captains, you are free to engage at your discretion. There is no plan. Fight as you see fit. Survive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, chaos erupted. A human frigate made a reckless charge directly into the hive's center. A Veltharian cruiser suddenly broke off to protect a damaged human destroyer, even though it left its flank exposed. Ships started working together, not through coordination, but through instinct, covering each other, taking risks that made no tactical sense, but somehow worked. The hive's formations began to fall apart. Its predictions became useless. For the first time in its existence, it encountered an enemy it could not categorize or understand. On the throne world, Prince Kael made his move. With the fleet engaged, he launched a coup, using loyal troops to seize the palace. But Emperor Thane was old, not helpless. Ambassador Yuna and her security team helped him reach a secure location. Kael found himself facing not just Veltharian resistance, but human resolve. Stand down, Yuna told him calmly. You have lost. I am claiming what is rightfully mine. Kael snarled. By betraying your people during their darkest hour? History will not be kind to you. In space, the tide turned. Admiral Ji-Sung coordinated with Isla for a final assault on the hive nexus itself. They would need a boarding party to reach the core intelligence and shut it down. I will go, Daeho said. Too dangerous, Isla replied. I can survive things others cannot. You know this. She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Come back to me, always. The boarding party consisted of both humans and Veltharians. They fought through the hive ship's corridors, facing drones that adapted to every tactic. But the combined force was unpredictable enough that the hive could not stop them completely. Daeho reached the core chamber, a vast space filled with biological machinery. At its center was the nexus itself, a pulsing mass of organic computers. It spoke to him, not in words, but in pure information, trying to understand what he was. And it failed. Humans were too contradictory, too chaotic. The Nexus could not comprehend a species that bonded across genetic lines, that chose cooperation over efficiency, that survived through stubbornness rather than strength. Daeho uploaded a virus, but not a destructive one. It was information, human philosophy, human culture, the concept of individuality. The Nexus absorbed it, and something changed. Throughout the hive fleet, drones began to stop fighting. They hung in space, suddenly possessing something they had never had before: choice. The war ended not with destruction, but transformation. The aftermath of the battle left everyone exhausted but alive. The hive fleet drifted in space, no longer attacking, but not quite peaceful either. Individual drones were making their own decisions now, and they seemed confused by this new freedom. Some fled into deep space. Others stayed, trying to communicate. Daeho recovered in the medical bay of Isla's flagship. His body was covered in burns and cuts from fighting through the hive ship. But he was healing. Dr. Hannah checked on him constantly, amazed by his recovery rate. You should have died 3 times in that assault, she said, shaking her head. But here you are, complaining about the food. The food is terrible, Daeho protested. It tastes like metal. Isla entered, and Dr. Hannah quickly excused herself. The princess sat beside his bed, her armor replaced with simple robes. She looked tired but relieved. You did it, she said softly. We did it. All of us, The Nexus fragments are communicating. They want to understand individuality. Some are asking to join the Galactic Coalition as independent entities. Da Ho smiled. Individual hive members. That is probably the most ironic thing I have ever heard. The galaxy is changing. And you started it all by crashing into my sanctum. Best accident of my life. She took his hand. There is more news. My father has decided to abdicate. His health is failing, and he believes the Empire needs strong leadership now. He named me as his successor. Empress Isla, it suits you. And you will be Emperor Consort if you accept. Day Ho froze. Wait, what? Did you think you could escape that responsibility? She smiled. You are bonded to me. Where I go, you go. My fate is your fate. I am just a salvage worker. You were a salvage worker. Now you are the man who helped unite two species and stop the hive. Own what you have become, Deo. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay, but I am still going to complain about the food. She laughed, and it was the best sound he had heard in months. The coronation was held 3 weeks later. Representatives from dozens of species attended, including a full delegation from Earth. The ceremony was ancient and beautiful, filled with rituals that had been performed for thousands of years. But Isla changed one important part. When she stood before the assembled crowds, she announced that humanity would be elevated to founding member status in a new organization, the Galactic Coalition. No longer would species stand alone. They would work together, share knowledge, defend each other. Some of the older Valtharian houses protested. They saw it as diluting their power. But the younger generation, those who had fought alongside humans against the hive, cheered loudly. Deho stood beside Isla during the ceremony, wearing formal robes that felt too fancy. Su Bin and Jinwu sat in the front row, both grinning at him. Admiral Jae-sung saluted from his seat. Even Commander Vel, who had once hated him, now nodded with respect. After the public ceremony, there was a private moment. Emperor Thane, now retired, met with Deho in a quiet garden within the palace. I did not approve of you at first, the old emperor admitted. I thought you were a weakness my daughter could not afford. I was wrong. You had every right to be suspicious, Deho said. Perhaps. But you proved yourself through action, not words. You saved my daughter's life. You helped end a war that could have destroyed us. And more than that, you showed us that strength comes in forms we did not recognize. Humans are not special. We just got lucky a lot. Thane smiled. Luck and stubbornness are closer than you think. The Valtharians believed we were the peak of civilization. We were wrong. There is no peak. There is only growth, and growth requires learning from others. The old emperor placed a hand on Deho's shoulder. Take care of my daughter, and take care of the future you have helped create. On the throne world, life continued. Deho still felt out of place sometimes. He attended meetings where decisions affecting billions were made. He helped negotiate treaties with species he had never heard of 6 months ago. But he also found time to work with engineers, to talk with common people, to stay connected to the reality beyond palace walls. Su Bin became his chief advisor, much to the surprise of the traditional Valtharian court. You need someone who will tell you when you are being an idiot, she explained. That is my job now. I thought you were an engineer. I contain multitudes. One evening, the Deho stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The lights stretched to the horizon, millions of lives going about their business. Somewhere up there, his old salvage ship probably still drifted, waiting for a crew that would never return. Isla joined him, wrapping an arm around his waist. What are you thinking about? How strange life is. 6 months ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I am helping govern an empire. Do you regret it? Not even a little bit. He turned to face her. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had not touched that spatial fold. If I had just grabbed a different piece of scrap, then the bonding would not have happened. The hive would have continued destroying colonies. Earth and Velthera would still see each other as strangers. Everything would be different. You believe in fate? I believe in possibilities. And I believe that when two possibilities meet unexpectedly, something new can be created. A message came through on Isla's communicator. She checked it and smiled. The first joint human Veltharian colony ship is launching tomorrow. 5,000 volunteers from each species going to settle a new world together. That is fast work. People are excited. They see a future that is bigger than their individual cultures. They want to be part of building it. More news came in the following days. The transformed hive fragments were joining the coalition as individual representatives. Some species that had remained neutral during the war were now seeking membership. Trade routes were opening. Cultural exchanges were being planned. Not everything was perfect. There were still factions that opposed the changes. Some Veltharians believed humans were corrupting their culture. Some humans thought Earth was giving up too much sovereignty. There were protests, debates, and occasional violence. But slowly, steadily, things were changing for the better. Prince Kale, stripped of his titles after the coup attempt, sat in comfortable exile on a distant world. Before he was sent away, he asked to speak with Dei-Ho. They met in a secure room, guards watching. I underestimated you, Kale said bluntly. I thought you were weak. I was wrong. I am not here to gloat. Good, because I am not here to apologize. But I will give you advice. The harder you push for change, the harder some will push back. Be careful. Isla may be Empress, but she has enemies. I know. Do you? Real enemies. People who see what you represent as the end of everything they value. They will not challenge you openly. They will be subtle. Why are you telling me this? Kale smiled coldly. Because I may disagree with what you are doing, but you saved the Empire. That counts for something. And because watching you fail would be less satisfying than watching you succeed despite the obstacles. It was the closest thing to respect Kale would ever give. And Dei-Ho accepted it. A year after the coronation, Dei-Ho stood in the same sanctum where his journey had begun. The room had been restored, the symbols once again glowing soft blue. High Priestess Nara was there, performing a blessing. The sanctum chose well, she said. It saw what we could not, that humanity's gift is not strength or intelligence, but the ability to endure and adapt. And more importantly, the willingness to connect across divides. I just crashed into the wrong room, Dei-Ho said. Nara laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Perhaps, or perhaps the sanctum opened the spatial fold specifically to bring you here. We will never know. What matters is what you did with the opportunity. Isla entered, and Nara left them alone. They stood together in the center of the sanctum, the same spot where they had first met. Do you remember what you said? Isla asked. When you first arrived? Sorry, wrong room. She laughed. The most important moment of our lives, and that is what you said. I have never been good with first impressions. On the contrary, you made an excellent impression. Confused, apologetic, completely unprepared for the situation. Very human. Is that a compliment? The highest one I can give. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the symbols drift through the air. Outside the sanctum, the Empire was changing. Species that had never worked together were now building a shared future. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and failures. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Dei-Ho thought about the texts High Priestess Nara had mentioned. The enduring ones. Humanity had earned that title not through physical power, but through sheer refusal to give up. They had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. They had adapted to every environment on Earth, and now they were adapting to the galaxy. But more than that, they had shown others that survival was not just about individual strength. It was about connection, cooperation, and the willingness to learn from those different from yourself. What are you thinking? Isla asked that I am glad I touched that spatial fold, even though it turned your life upside down. Especially because of that. He took her hand. The best things in life happen when we end up somewhere we never meant to be. She squeezed his hand. Then let us continue ending up in unexpected places, together. Through the window, stars glittered against the darkness. Each one represented possibilities, adventures, futures yet to be written. Da Shou had spent his life collecting scraps from the past. Now he was helping build the future. And it all started with a simple accident, entering a room he was never supposed to see, meeting a princess who would change everything, and discovering that sometimes the galaxy's greatest adventures begin with 3 simple words. Sorry. Wrong room. But it had been exactly the right room, at exactly the right time. And that made all the difference.